Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mortgage Smart Money podcast. I'm really excited about this. Even though the terminology mortgage is in the title, you're not going to be limited to just the mortgage industry. We're going to get really in depth on the real estate market and how to navigate in today's market. Today, I have two guests for you. I have an industry insider and I have a featured realtor to give you information on how to navigate your transactions in today's market. I have with me today my industry insider. I have Christine Gilmore, who has been with Chicago Title for 23 years. Christine has been a top producer for 23 years. She's been a keynote speaker at investor associations and at the realtor associations. She's an investor in multifamily across the country, I believe, across the country, or is it?
SoCal.
Oh, in Southern California. And she's going to be sharing with you some tidbits in title that you can utilize in your next transaction. I also have a long-time friend of mine, Robert Biggs, who's a realtor with Beverly & Company, and he's laughing at me right now for some reason. I don't know why, but I guess I shouldn't have said he's my friend, but he's with Beverly & Company. He is an investor, and he also dabbles in insurance, right?
That is correct.
Excellent, excellent. So, number one, I appreciate you guys being here on the inaugural episode. So many more to come. But this very first topic that I wanted to start off with, my industry insider, Christine Gilmore. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in title?
It's been a long one. So I've been with Chicago for 23 years. Prior to that, I was with a smaller, localized company called Investors Title.
Right.
And I started my career right out of college and learned the industry as I went along. So my title...
Right after college, so like 6 months ago.
Exactly.
Right.
Thank you for that, Greg. I appreciate it. So I have a little bit of experience under my belt in the title insurance world.
Got it. Now, as far as the associations that you were speaking at, what kind of topics were you speaking with, like investors or realtors?
Last month, I spoke one of the largest investment clubs in Los Angeles. They have a really great base, and it was forecasting for 2023 in real estate.
Excellent. Forecasting. Now, this market that we're in right now, would you say that this is an anomalous market, or would you say that this is just one of those cyclical time frames that we all experience every 20, 25 years?
Well, I think historically speaking, Greg, we've been in a decrease in interest rate environment for almost 2 decades.
Right.
That's a long time.
Right.
So right now we're in an adjustment period. I think the difference is, the good news is, and I'm looking at 2023 as being a great time for investors, right? To come into the market and to be able to continue to buy and invest. There'll be different opportunities that arise in 2023. The interesting part about our market is that it's very different than our last down cycle in that people are vested and there's a lot of equity in people's homes.
Right.
Whereas in the last down cycle that Robert and you and I experienced that was very different was we were in a very strong short sale market where people were not vested. They didn't have a lot of equity. And over the last decade, lending guidelines have changed drastically.
Right.
And people are vetted. So we're not going to see the same level of down cycle within real estate that we did during the last downturn.
So in layman's terms, the crash that we experienced back, initiated by the 2008, the Great Recession, we're not going to see that level of correction, you're saying?
No, the last down cycle really put the United States economy on its knees, right? Real estate is always in the... bad. And real estate is obviously the forefront in what turns and churns the United States economy. And I know that also, Robert, as a developer, in developing a home, what happens? People purchase an asset, they purchase real estate, they build, they buy lumber, they remodel, they add windows, floors, paint. It makes the whole economy
go.
Right? It makes the economy churn. So the good news is that people that currently own homes are not going to see the same down cycle of 30% to 40% correction, but we will definitely see a correction. And that also is due to the fact that we're in a different interest rate environment than we were. So in my, the history of my career, I haven't seen as strong as an interest rate increase in such a short period of time.
Right.
So I think right now people are in an adjustment period. They're adjusting to the new interest rate environment.
Right. Let me ask you this, and Robert, you can chime in on this. Los Angeles County has a moratorium so that way people don't lose their houses right now, and I think it's scheduled to expire. I don't know if it's this month or next month or whatever the case may be, but do you anticipate there being an influx, even though it may not go to the degree of 2008, but do you anticipate an influx of foreclosed homes, notice of defaults being on the rise, things of that nature?
So right now, on daily, I get requests from clients of mine. I want to look at REOs and I want to look at NODs in certain pockets all over the city.
NODs means?
Notice of defaults.
Right.
And real estate owned, meaning that the bank has actually taken the asset back.
Right.
So banks are not in the business of taking real estate back. They
Right.
like to lend money. They don't like to take homes back and resell them. So interestingly enough, I was talking to my regional that runs the West Coast for Chicago Title 2 weeks ago. And there's a company that actually processes REOs. That's their whole job, is to take REOs and process them from start to finish. They just laid off their top 2 REO escrow officers.
Really?
So what does that tell us? We're not seeing REOs in this market. They're selling at the steps, at the investment steps, meaning that investors such as people that are listening to the podcast, Robert, you, me, can actually go to the steps and auction and bid on those properties. So we're having investors going to the steps and bidding and procuring those properties before they go back to the bank and become a real estate owned asset of the bank.
Right. What kind of discounts do you think that these investors are experiencing?
Well, it depends on where the property's located, right? And where it's located in Southern California, there's a big differentiation between the IE, the Inland Empire, and the West Side, and it depends on where the asset's located.
Right.
But we're seeing properties go on the investment steps, but we're not seeing the REOs and the foreclosures that we did in the last market. And short sales still haven't hit, but you have to remember that we're still at the beginning of the recession. We are in a recession, and all 12 economic indicators are showing us that we are currently in a recession. But with that being said, it really hasn't felt its full effect yet on all areas of the population.
I see. And Robert, have you experienced any of the investors that you work with that are on the lookout for any of these types of properties that Christine was mentioning?
Yeah, they're always looking, but it's not like before when you can find them a dime a dozen. Mm-hmm. So now when people are going through the investment steps, you have competition there. And so it's other investors there that are trying to do the same thing that you're doing. So that's driving the price up a little bit more than it was back in the day when they could, get properties, a lot cheaper.
And from your experience, is this market, this recession that we're embarking upon right now, do you think that it's going to be to the degree it was the last recession? I know Christine says no. But
no, absolutely not. And just like she said, a lot of people back then, they don't have the equity that the people do today.
Right.
So, why lose your home to foreclosure when you can just sell it, take that money and, start over another time?
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. I should probably get to my prepared questions I had for you. We just started rolling.
Yeah, we did.
So Christine, can you tell me, let's start off with what title insurance is.
The big question mark. What is title insurance? Actually, title insurance in its simplest form, it's the elimination of risk. So what we do as a title insurance company is eliminate risk on a new home that you're buying.
Risk for whom?
For the buyer and for the bank.
Got it.
Right? So we want to make sure that you as a new buyer, Greg, if you go out into the marketplace and let's say Robert's your real estate agent, Robert's representing you on a house. no matter where it is, we want to make sure that you're going to be in first position on that property, meaning ahead of any other liens,
Right.
super liens, child support liens, mechanics liens, judgments, IRS liens, franchise tax board liens, that everything's been cleared. So when you actually buy the house, that you're the rightful and legal owner in first position.
And nobody can come back and lay claim to that particular property.
Exactly.
If somebody did, how would title insurance protect that person if someone actually did try to lay claim on a property?
So when we insure a new buyer, they get what's called an ALTA policy.
Right.
They get a loan. That ALTA policy is also insuring the bank that the loan is going to be in first position in case they do need to foreclose, that they're senior to any other liens before them. So there's a protection in the ALTA policy that provides for fraud protection.
Right.
So if something did happen and you purchased a property, and if for some reason it ended up being fraudulent, the title insurance company is responsible for that.
And they have to pay out.
Yeah. So it's called a claim. Mm-hmm.
Got it. And you already touched upon the different types of title insurance, right? You mentioned.
So ALTA policy, right, is a policy that protects the lender, and also it's called a concurrent policy when you're the buyer. And that's what you do when you purchase a new home. Right. Or if you're going to refinance and you already own a home, you want to take cash out of your property, or your interest rate's getting ready to come due, or you want to take money out for your kids' college education, and you do refinance. We also provide an ALTA policy, which is considered to be a lender policy that insures the lender. And then if you're going to sell your home, if you or Robert were going to sell a home that you own together, we provide what's called a homeowner's policy.
Right.
And that policy represents the seller on the transaction.
Right. And then for those clients that may be interested on the price of title insurance, now we know it's going to vary dependent upon like the property and maybe the general area, possibly. I guess this is your wheelhouse, so you tell me. But how would you answer that as far as costs?
So in the state of California, title insurance, it's posted. We post our rates legally in Sacramento. So as a title insurance industry, we don't vary a lot. 5 to 8%, really at most, between if you were to go shop.
Right.
So we have to legally post our rates. So if you come to me, Greg, and say, Christine, I'm going to buy a house for $1 million, I don't get to quote you whatever I want. We've always been a very highly regulated industry, and our rates are posted.
Right. When you say 5 or 8%, is that based on the purchase price or based on?
So the seller's policy, the homeowner's policy is based upon the sales price.
Got it.
And the buyer's policy is based upon their new loan amount.
Got
it. So the seller's policy, again, is based on the sales price, and the buyer's policy is based upon the new loan.
Got it. Perfect. Also, when it comes to mortgages, I know you touched upon some of, before we started recording, you were touching upon like how many refinances were taking place back in 2008 or whatnot. Are you seeing an influx of refinances as of right now? And I'm going to assume no, because interest rates have increased, but have you seen an influx in refinances?
So we saw, obviously during COVID, interest rates effectively went to 0% overnight.
Right.
And volume tripled effectively, and everything was refinanced because people were taking advantage of the low interest rates. And then fast forward, since the interest rate increase started to take place at the end of the summer, I would say 90% of refinances have dried up in the residential world.
Right. Commercial
refinances are still taking place. And now the majority of the transactions that I'm doing are commercial versus residential.
Got it. So do you anticipate once we get this market correction that we're anticipating, at least other sources that I've been following have been saying possibly in the next 1.5 to 2 years that there may be a correction? Do you anticipate more refinances at that point?
So I think really interest rates should have been raised over a year ago.
Really?
So we're late to the party. The government's late to the party in raising interest rates. This should have been done over a year ago. And now again, we're overcorrecting, right?
Got it.
Meaning that there's an overcorrection happening. And that we see that a lot, right, in real estate.
Yes.
We have a tendency to overcorrect ourselves. So economists my company's a Fortune 250. And so the economists that are forecasting for 2023, we're looking at 20% decrease in business for 2023 from a sales perspective, right? From year over year, from January to January. Right now, what we're seeing, Greg, is we're seeing refinances on an as-needed basis, meaning I need cash. I need to send my kids to college. I need to remodel. I need to help my mom out. I need to help my grandma out.
They have a need.
There's a need. It's on an as-needed basis now.
Right.
I do believe, and obviously nobody has a crystal ball, but because of the overcorrection, the second quarter of next year, we'll see the T-bill, the 10-year Treasury bond
dip.
Yes, dip a little bit in there, and interest rates will go down on the second quarter of next year.
Got it. So I had a client ask me once this year.
Mm-hmm.
They asked me, what exactly is a cloud on title? Because the property that we were getting,
it's a problem.
You're right, right.
It's a problem.
An issue from a mortgage standpoint, for a real estate standpoint.
What was it? Do you remember?
Oh, I know, because we end up not getting it.
Okay.
So they moved as soon as they found out that there was a cloud. They just, the realtor just took the couple on, basically.
Okay.
So, but could you explain what a cloud on title?
A cloud on title could take on so many different variations and forms. Every day I solve clouds on title, and that's how we get transactions closed, right?
Right.
It could be a mechanic's lien. People's lives are realized through real estate.
Right.
You go through a divorce, you go through a foreclosure, you can't pay your bills, you lose your job. Right. Really, people's lives are realized through a piece of real estate they own. And what happens is when we run title, that picture comes out on our title report, which is called a preliminary title report.
Right.
And if there's problems on there, oh, Greg, we didn't get the taxes paid. Oh, we forgot to pay the IRS 5 years ago. Oh, we didn't file our taxes on time. Oh, we went through a divorce and I still owe my ex money. That all comes, those are all different forms and variations of clouds. Some are easier to solve than others.
Right.
But the process of curing title before Robert buys the piece of property to develop or own, we cure title. We make sure that title is clear. Otherwise, we can't close.
Right.
Because again, we want to make sure that the new buyer's in first position.
Right.
And the lender won't close without knowing that. So we have to clear clouds, problems on title. And they come in many different forms.
And just from your experience, and I know this is probably a case-by-case basis, but the hardest liens to clear, what would you say that? Would you say that it's child support liens? I mean, they have to deal with the courts, or would you say it's mechanics liens? What are like the hardest ones?
The hardest liens that I've had to clear was in the past foreclosure market when people were trying to stave off or not lose their home to foreclosure.
Right.
They would go to attorneys, and attorneys would file a false deed of trust, a deed of trust that wasn't real, and they'd put a face value amount on it of, let's say, $60,000, and they'd have 16 beneficiaries to that deed of trust, none of which were real individuals. Or they could be 16 different family members. Robert knows he was living the same nightmare I was.
Right.
So clearing that kind of a deed of trust when it's what we call a false deed of trust.
Right.
I know that if I owe child support money, and let's say I had 4 kids and I decided not to pay my child support, we can send a demand to child support and get the demand back and show how much we owe plus interest.
Right.
So those really can all be solved. Right. By sending a demand out, and we find out how much is owed on it, but they take longer to clear. Because whenever you're dealing with a governmental entity, the IRS, the Franchise Tax Board, child support, it's going to be a minimum of 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be slow.
It seems slow when you want to close.
Yeah.
Seems like it takes forever.
Robert, have you ever dealt with any clients that had a cloud on title issues?
I have had a client like that, child support issue, but it was resolved through the sale of the property.
Oh,
so
okay.
Basically, they just had to make sure that it was paid off through escrow, and then everything was clear and it went on.
Wow, that sounds like a lucky issue, because I had one.
Yeah.
I had one as a loan officer where somebody had child support issues, and he didn't know that he had child support issues, which I thought was kind of odd because, you would think that if you have child support issues.
You do, Greg.
Right. But
well, maybe not.
But maybe not because
that's true.
Someone had the same name as me and it came up
Yes.
when I was purchasing one time and they were trying to, connect me to that whoever that person was, but then they finally realized, okay, that's a different Robert Biggs. So
so it can come up. It can come up.
So, and one of the ways that we clear that in title, right, Robert, is we use what's called an SI, a statement of information,
right,
and then that Robert
that's
Biggs
supposed to.
My husband's name is Michael Thompson, and there's a judgment that came up for $120,000. I said, no, it's not ours. You run the social, you find out where you lived, who you've been married, and then you clear it. Yeah,
got it.
But it does come up.
So that statement of information is supposed to limit issues like what Robert just described.
And so if you call me, Greg, as a loan officer, if Robert calls me as a client, and the first question you ask me is, you'll say, Christine, we're trying to get this house sold, but my client Robert told me this isn't his child support lien. The first question I would ask you is, has Robert filled out the statement of information?
Right.
And the answer is 95% of the time, no.
Wow.
And it usually doesn't happen until the end of the transaction, but that's how we clear it.
So the lesson, kids, fill out your statement of information.
Early.
Right. And one other thing, as a loan officer, I come across people that do try to finance a property that is given from, let's say, a parent to a child or a relative to another relative or whatever the case may be. And sometimes these relatives that own the property, they try to quit claim the property to somebody else. I've had clients that ask me, can they, well, actually, let me ask you this. What kind of challenges can somebody come across by using like a quitclaim deed?
So as a title insurance company, one of the things we want to do is eliminate fraud and risk.
Right.
So when deeds are prepared outside the close of escrow, meaning they're not within the course of a transaction, a purchase or a refinance. And let's say one afternoon you come to me and I'm like, hey, Greg, I'm just going to give you my property over on Main Street.
Right.
And we fill out a quick claim deed, and I, Christine M. Gilmore, quick claim my property to Greg Harris. Go ahead and we record it. We don't record it through a title company. We don't record it through an escrow company. It just gets recorded through the LA County.
Right.
And all of a sudden, on title, it shows that Christine sold her property to Greg. Now, Greg, let's say you go to Robert, and Robert, you say, you know what, Robert, I really want to sell this house. And Robert says, okay. So Robert lists your house, and Susie is going to buy your house.
Right.
The first thing we do as a title insurance company, because that quitclaim deed, when I deeded my property to you, they're going to come back to me as a title insurance company and ask me to fill out what's called an uninsured deed affidavit. They want to make sure that I, Christine, was aware and knew and truly gave you my property. Right. And that's one of the ways that we prevent fraud. So when we see properties being deeded back and forth between family members, all we want to do is make sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody knows that that property had been deeded back and forth.
Right.
And now I'm being asked, Christine, were you aware that you signed a deed and that you gave your property to Greg? And I say yes.
Right.
But it's called an uninsured deed affidavit. And that's a way that because imagine you're 90 years old.
Right.
And one of your grandchildren needed money and prepared a deed and had grandma sign the deed and got it recorded through the county. We're still going to go back to grandma and make sure she was aware that she sold her property to her grandson or grandchild or granddaughter.
So there's no way initially, as far as the quitclaim is concerned, to insure that particularly.
You can insure it through title.
You can.
Even if you're not doing a transaction, people will ask me to insure them. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's a waste of money.
Oh, to insure a quitclaim deed is
to insure I can if I record the deed and we send it into the county, and I'll provide insurance based on the amount and the value of the home or the appraised value.
Right.
But I don't think it's necessary because if I know that Robert gave you his property and you quitclaimed it outside and gave the property to outside of escrow, I'm aware of that. My office is aware of that. I'm not going to ask Robert to sign an uninsured deed affidavit because I know it transpired.
Got it.
I know the people involved, but it happens when we don't know people involved.
That's when the affidavit is mandatory.
Necessary. And then it's also really and we really raise a lot of red flags with regards to the elder population, and we want to make sure that there's not elder abuse happening either.
Got it.
And that raises a lot of red flags in the title industry.
Understood. And one last question for you, and it has to do with your investing. So you do multifamily investing, and you do that on the West Coast, you said?
Just in California, just in Southern California.
Got it. And you primarily do it in multifamily, no other?
Just multi, yeah.
What's the minimum amount of units that you have? Minimum and maximum?
4 units is the smallest building. But I started buying 25 years ago, long time ago. Mm-hmm.
And
before I knew what I was doing.
and you prefer that over single family residences?
I do. That way, if you have a vacancy, you're not completely vacant.
Not completely out.
But it also comes with its own set of challenges.
Yes. Individualized challenges. Mm-hmm. Understood. Well, thank you for that piece of information. So what I'd like to do right now is even though we're going to put your information at the end of the podcast, but Christine, how do people get in contact with you?
Oh, Greg. My cell's pretty easy. It's 310-720-8000.
Wow, 728,000.
There you go. It's pretty easy.
Nice.
I got a good one.
Chicago title. And Robert Biggs, how do people get in contact with you?
By calling 213-361-6978.
And how long have you had that telephone number, Robert?
Oh my goodness. I've had that number since
Greg knows. You are lying like a rug, Greg. You know.
94 or 95.
Yes, that's the only, matter of fact.
It's in your Rolodex. It's in your
Christine,
head.
I knew Robert before they even had cell phones. And that's the first number he got.
And you still know it, don't you? That's cute.
Hey, so I want to thank you both for being here at the Mortgage Smart Money podcast. Our next podcast that we're going to have is we're going to have some investors here to share some of the secrets that investors are using in today's market. So you're going to want to tune in for that one. So thanks for showing up. You guys are awesome.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.